What up, y'all? Appreciate you showing up, hanging out, listening to my dumb ass. Like and subscribe. So, yesterday, I did a video, not yesterday, well, whenever it was, last video, it was about why I hate Sony and stuff. And basically, it was the backstory of how Sega was, I'm a Sega fanboy, and Sega, I fell in love with video games because of Sega. And Sony basically pushed Sega out of the console market. And it was a combination of factors, but Sony definitely had their hand in it. But then there was someone in my comments gave me a nice, long, chunky comment, and I appreciate it. And I respectfully disagree with a few points, but I'll just break it down so that you understand where I'm coming from. I didn't really explain how I came to become a Sega fanboy. Now, the consoles did not make me fall in love with Sega. I fell in love with Sega before the Sega Master System even existed, or before I owned a Sega Master System, let's put it that way. I fell in love with the arcade games from Sega. Arcade, and they were one of the number ones in the arcade business in the 80s. Yes, they were. From 85 to 87, 88, those 3 years or so, they were knocking them out, son. And it was all Yu Suzuki. Yu Suzuki was like Outrun, Afterburner, Hang On, Galaxy Force, let's go. Well, Galaxy Force 2. Power Drift. I was just like, I can't, the Super Scaler. That's what did it for me. And so, you know, going back, my first console was Atari 2600. I had one of those, sure. My cousin, he had a 2600, he had a 5200, he had an Apple IIe, he had an Apple II GS, he had a ColecoVision, he had the first Pong and the first Tank that were just big plastic things with controls on it. You plug into your TV. It wasn't a console. It was just a game with the big goofy controller. I had exposure to a lot of home consoles and television, Aquarius. Yeah, you don't even know about that. And all of the consoles were trying, and they were chasing that arcade power. They couldn't get it. Sega Master System, the reason why I got a Sega Master System because, oh snap, they got Outrun, they got Space Harrier. I love those games in the arcade. I take this home and I'm like, what is this? Blookity blink, bloop, blink. I'm like, oh, I was so disappointed. But, you know, the mindset of a fanboy is, it's good. I mean, at the time it was aight, but play it now. There's so much flicker and, oh, it's really bad. But for what it was, you know, now with emulation, you can get the arcade experience, you know, and it's cool. And then even then, it's like, okay, well, this is dated, but it's about nostalgia, right? But in the 80s, you know, Atari was chasing the arcade. They put out Pac-Man, and it was a hot piece of I was like, what the? That was my first disappointment in video games. I played Pac-Man in the arcade. I was like, oh, okay, this is Pac-Man. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, Pac-Man is so cool. I was like, it's all right, it's cool, it's fun to play, whatever. It wasn't a Space Harrier moment. That's the thing. I played Pac-Man way before. I played Pong. I played many games way before I played Space Harrier in that hotel arcade next to the pool somewhere in the Carolinas. I can't remember. It might have been in Georgia. I don't remember where we were, but we were going down to Florida, vacation. It was nighttime and Space Harrier. I don't even remember any of the other games that were Space Harrier. Anyway, so the Atari 2600 version of Pac-Man was something very special in a very bad way. It made me realize that, oh, just because it has the same name doesn't equate to the same quality as far as comparable to the arcade. And that was my first eye-opener. And that was, like I said, before I even laid eyes on Space Harrier. And right then and there, when I saw Pac-Man, I was like, okay, I gotta check myself with my expectations, basically. I'm a little kid too. And you know, when you're a little kid and you get disappointed, That's what it was. I was like, okay, guess I'm gonna go watch G.I. Joe or something. They never let me down. Transformers never let me down. Roll out. He gonna say that. I know it. I know Optimus is gonna say that. Transform. Let's go. So, as a kid, you fall back on your old faithfuls, the things that don't disappoint you, the consistency of Voltron, form blazing sword. Anyway. That happened, right? So Pac-Man was like, what is this? I got E.T., I played it, I was like, what is this game? It was colorful, it was weird, it wasn't as bad as Pac-Man, but it was just like, I don't understand what this game is. I couldn't understand what the gameplay was. As you walk around, a guy in a suit chases you, you fall down a hole, you lift back up, I don't know. I said, I don't care. I played Adventure. Adventure was one of the better games because even though graphics sucked, at least it was like you get the key, you go to you run away from the dragon, you get to the maze, you solve it in like 2 minutes or whatever. I don't know how long the speed run is on that button, but I remember finishing Adventure. And like Warlords, that was a cool game because it was 4 players and we would all play together, me and my brother and my cousin, like it was cool. Not as good as the arcade, but the gameplay was so good that it didn't matter that it didn't look as good as the arcade. So, you know, in some respects, it's not about the graphics, it's about how it plays and frames per second. And it's funny, like the Atari 2600 was 60 frames per second. And we can't, Final Fantasy 16 can't even get 60 frames per second. What? Atari 2600 outperforming the PlayStation 5, what? Anyway, back to what I was saying. So yeah, the history is like, I have a lot of experience and nostalgia and memories of all of those, like Atari 2600, 5200, not so much, because they didn't have that many games. But the ColecoVision, one game I did remember was Smurfs Adventure. I think it was Smurfs Adventure. And I was like, this is way better than Atari. ColecoVision greater than Atari 2600, let's just be real. It was, but you know, they didn't have the library and they got sued out of their pants because they put the 2600 adapter that you just plug into the side of the Coleco. You can play Atari games on your ColecoVision. It was like, yeah, my cousin had that. I was like, oh, this is cool. Sued, out of business. So, you know, stuff like that. And, you know, I was kind of just meandering through video games at that point, you know, doing some Bard's Tale on the Apple IIe, green and black. But it was cool. Played Zork. I think I played that on Apple IIe as well. And that was, you know, that's imagine those, you know, those text adventures are about your imagination and stuff. I mean, it is, but you know, there's still a finite way that you have to go through the game. But you know, I played a bunch of King's Quest. I had a PC Junior, IBM PC Junior, which is horrible. It had like 4 colors, and it was like the worst color. Pick the worst colors. Let's make a computer with that. I was like, oh, jeez. Anyway, so I had that. I played King's Quest on there, and the computer was so slow. The PC Junior was not good. And it was so slow that when the screen loaded up, the background would load up, and then anything else that was interactive that you could interact with would load up afterwards. So you always knew, if you paid attention to what popped in at the end, what you could basically interact with. And as a kid, I learned that real quick. I was like, oh, okay, the apple. I'll get to go grab the apple. Oh, there's this thing over the tree, or just, you know, it's goofy. But King's Quest was a cool little game, you know, for the time. It's like, oh, it's kind of open world, but it's not all like, you know, it's just screen by screen. But anyway, that's what games were back then. I barely played Ultima. I didn't play it too much, although that's where I get tilt weight from. If you guys don't know, when I say tilt weight at the end of every video, that's from Ultima. I think that's Ultima 2. It's a name of the spell, and that's all I'll tell you. You want to know the rest? You go look it up. Google is your friend. Anyway, but and my cousin started that, so it's your fault. Trooper Rabbit, it's your fault. Anyway, so you know, Ultima, computers. We got an Aquarius after the PC Junior, which was more powerful, but it was still pretty crappy. It had like a spongy keyboard. I played Dungeons and Dragons on that. That was kind of dope. It was like a first person 3D. I was like, you know what, this is all right. I played the heck out of it, but Aquarius was not they call it a computer, but it was barely that. It was like a toy. Anyway, that, and then we had a, what was it called? It was the one where you put these big tan brown, like, it was like cartridges, like the whole front of it went on it. I think Mattel made that. I can't remember what that one was called. I gotta look it up. I'll try to find out what it is called, but I had one of those. That was a handheld. It was okay. It wasn't the best. A lot of Tiger electronics, but I don't really count those because they're goofy and they're LCD, and they're not, you know, they're not really, when I say LCD, I mean the old liquid crystal, just the black with the anyway, moving on. My cousin gets a NES, and he gets all the games. He got Zelda. I played Zelda at his house. We lived like 3 blocks away, so I was always over there. Played Zelda over there. My brother got an NES. I was like, what sense does it make for me to get an NES? I'm gonna get a Sega Master System because Space Harrier, Outrun, let's go. That was the impetus for me to get a Sega Master System. Even though they had a small little nothing library, they didn't have any third-party games, hardly, you know. Towards the end of the life cycle, they were getting some, but it was too late at that point. And the funny thing is, I was looking at some videos recently where they showed some Sega Master System games, and they started getting a lot out of that system, like, you know, have, you know, multiple scrolling backgrounds and stuff. I'm like, how did they do that on a Sega Master System? Because I remember none of them games had like parallax scrolling, and like Aladdin had parallax scrolling. Alien 3, yeah, Alien 3 just had 2 backgrounds, but it was like, it was pretty dope. I'm trying to remember, did Zillion? No, Zillion didn't have it. I had Zillion because basically it was based off of anime, and they actually modeled the Sega Light Phaser from the anime. So if you watch the anime, it's the Sega Light Phaser, and it's crazy. I was like, oh, okay. I still have it. It's in my junk of junks. It's in my pile of jinx. I think I should go find the old Sega Master System just to have it. But anyway, but yeah, so I bought the Sega Master System. When you're a kid, you know, you can't afford these things. So I got half of the money, and I think my pops or whatever got me the other half. And I was like, I got half, yay! And then they're like, all right, we'll get it for you. And I got it. I think it was like $150 maybe or something. I can't remember how much it was. And first game I got, well, it came with Hang On, which was built in. Well, the snail game was built in. Yeah, the snail game was built in. If you don't put in a cartridge, it's just there's a blue maze with a little yellow snail, and that was kind of cool. I was like, oh, it's a built-in game, and I think it came with Hang On, and I was like, that's cool. It's a cool little game. I played the hell out of that game because that's the only game I had because I'm a broke little kid. And then soon after, I bought, you know, Space Harrier. I think that was the first game I bought. Outrun, Afterburner. Oh my gosh, Afterburner is so not good on the Sega Master System. But, you know, when I played Afterburner in the arcade, it kept reinforcing my love for Sega because first I played Space Harrier. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. Then I played Outrun. I was like, oh, I like racing games. This is pretty cool. Then I played Afterburner. I said, that's it, the GOAT. Sega's the GOAT. They made the best. They're the best. All based on the arcade. My love for Sega is based off their arcade, not their home consoles. I didn't really think the Genesis wasn't as good as the arcade. Not even close. And so they tried, but they couldn't do it. So they get a little bit of props for like Streets of Rage and stuff like that, where, you know, it's not an arcade, it's, you know, and the music is just crazy nice. I think the problem I have with Streets of Rage is that the first game had the best music, in my opinion. I listened to the second game, I was like, it's not as good as the first. It's like, it loses a little luster, just like Sonic did. The first Sonic game, in my opinion, had the best music, had the better music. And so, a lot of the things about the Genesis were, it's kind of a hit or miss. The NES definitely had a better sound chip than the Sega Master System, but the Genesis had a better sound chip than the Super Nintendo. So, the sound was whatever. And then, you know, I was in on Sega because I was determined to get that arcade experience at home. And so I got a Saturn, right? I mean, I got the Sega CD, I got the 32X, so I got Afterburner and Space Harrier on the 32X, and they were close. They were definitely closer than what they had before, right? Than the regular 16-bit cartridges, which came out later. They were definitely better. They were like half the they were half, not the resolution, but they were half the frame rate. I think they were 30 frame. In the arcade is 60, obviously. And so they weren't quite there, and the sound wasn't as pristine, but it was closer. So I was kind of, oh, that's okay. But I still knew that it wasn't good enough because I had the Star Wars game that was like, meh, you know what I'm saying? The 32X was a weird system. Once again, a weird system because yes, it had good audio and it had more storage, but it didn't really have more power as far as computational power for the actual game itself. And that sucked because that's what we need. That's what we wanted. That's what we needed. So, and that's what we didn't get. And so the Saturn came out, and I was like, okay, here we go. And the problem with the Saturn was it was $399, a lot of money, and the PlayStation came out soon after and just ate its lunch, basically. The Saturn was RISC processors, 232 RISC processors running in parallel, I believe, and it was just harder to code for, and that's why it was a little bit. It was a no-brainer, and Sony went around telling all the devs, yo, the Saturn is trash, ours is easier and more powerful, let's go. And that's what happened with that. But I will say that the Saturn came, I would say, almost the closest to arcade perfect before the Dreamcast, obviously, with Outrun, Space Harrier, Galaxy Force, I think. I have Sega Ages on the Saturn, and so it has I know it has Space Harrier and Outrun. I don't remember what the third game is though, but it's dope. I'm like, yo, this is what's up. I got Power Drift, but they never released it in America, I don't think, so I had to buy a Japanese version on eBay for like $45, like years and years after. I was like, fine, let's go. I bought that. And I got Galaxy Force the same way. It wasn't too expensive. They were supposedly unopened. I mean, it was pristine, so it might have been new, or they just might have, I don't know how they did it, but whatever. I'm happy. And, they're just certain little, the business of arcade, the business of video games is such that, the Sega Saturn it wasn't good as far as the competition. The PlayStation was better. When the Dreamcast came out, that was awesome. The Dreamcast was Sega's best console, and it was perfect. It played all the arcade games that I cared about. They literally had a Yu Yu Suzuki collection with Power Drift, Afterburner, Super Thunder Force, Space Harrier, Outrun, all these games, all of Yu Suzuki's games didn't come out in the US, which sucked. And it came with a book. It was like, it was maybe like $200, $250. I forget how much it was. But of course it's not for sale anymore, obviously, because it's so old. And I was like, man, I wish I could have that. If they would have sold that in the US, or if I had found it somewhere in here in the US, I would have definitely bought it. Because I had disposable income at the time. I'm a young man with a good job. I'm like, let's go. So, but I didn't find it and whatever. So now I'm just gonna emulate all those things and build arcade games, arcade cabinets for all my favorite Yu Suzuki joints. But the moral of the story is to give you a more in-depth background of my love of Sega and why I dislike Sony so much is because their business practices back in the day caused ultimately the downfall of Sega. And they're trying to do the same thing to Xbox. And as far as I'm concerned, Xbox is the relatives, is the predecessors of the Sega systems, of the Dreamcast in particular, because the Dreamcast was basically the Xbox Zero. The Dreamcast had what kind of operating system? Windows, CE. It was a Windows operating system. They collaborated on that. And then when Sega went down, Xbox was like, yo, we got to get in and let's go. They collaborated again with Sega. Xbox called Sega and said, yo, let's go. And they helped with some design choices. And I mean, ultimately, Microsoft did their Thug Thizzle and just took off-the-shelf parts to make the system. But remember when the Xbox launched, they had Jet Set Radio. They had Sega GT as a pack-in. When I bought the console, that's what came with the 2 Sega games. I was like, yes, let's go. I was like, this is like the Dreamcast 2, let's go. And that's what it felt like. A little greener, but still. And then, you know, Shenmue 2 came out. All these games, Sega games. Now, I know Sega put out a lot of PS2 games, a lot of Space Harrier 2000 or whatever. And honestly, I watched the video. I didn't play it, but I was like, that's hot trash. That is not, nope. Space Harrier 2 is better than that trash. That's how bad that game was. I would say Afterburner Climax is pretty good. But still, the original still has a nostalgic kind of flair, kind of, I don't know, charisma, if you will. If a game could have charisma, Afterburner does. It has it, you know, especially because it's pixel art and all that stuff. But anyway, you know, that's basically it. The backstory of why, or me as a video game person, and why I don't like Sony that much, because they're doing this same old, and people are acting like they haven't been doing this for decades. And I don't understand it. I mean, y'all got amnesia? Y'all don't remember? And everybody's like, oh yeah, remember when Sony was gonna make the disk drive for Nintendo, and they screwed over Nintendo? Sony didn't screw over Nintendo. Nintendo screwed over Sony and went with Philips, as I understand it. And how it happened was, Sony was gonna make it was called the PlayStation for the Super Nintendo, I believe. And they were all ready to show, and then I think it was the CES at whatever CES it was, I can't remember what year it was, 94, 5, something. Yeah. And Nintendo showed up with Philips. So yeah, we're gonna come with Philips. We're gonna make the CD thing, and Sony was like, what the fuck? What happened? But honestly, I think that was after Sony demanded all the rights to Mario and all their games and stuff. I'm like, yo, really, Sony? It's so crazy how Sony, from the jump, thought that they were privileged, thought that they, you know, deserved all this stuff when they were like nobody. And the only thing that they can cling on to right now is the fact that they sold all these console units. But that's a losing battle. You know, they know that. It's a losing battle, and I don't understand. I mean, these are grown-ass businessmen. How can they sit there and lie to themselves, you know, year after year, not see the change in the market, not seeing the change in the human behavior? Because I know they have psychologists over there at PlayStation, at Sony, figuring out how to make games so that people keep buying them and people keep spending money. That's part of the game of video games, is to make a game that is addictive. Similar to, you know, gambling and slot machines. That's why like the loot boxes and all that stuff came about. It's because, oh, we can do this. You know, people would just buy it. You know, they get addicted. They just keep putting money into it. But anyway, that was kind of it. Why I hate Sony. I guess this is why I hate Sony Part 2. It's more in depth. You know, after the Dreamcast went away, I know I'm reiterating a little bit, but after the Dreamcast got killed, Peter Moore announced it. I was like, damn. And I stopped playing video games until 2004. So what was that, 2000 when they announced? Yeah, because it was $99.99. I think it was 2001. Might have been 2001 when they stopped, when they announced it and they canceled and they stopped making Dreamcast. And I stopped playing video games until I think 2004, 3 or 4. And I bought that Xbox. And then they soon after said, we're not making Xbox anymore because the new console was coming out. So I was like, all right, cool. And so yeah, I've been with Xbox ever since, you know. And don't get it twisted. I got a PS1, I have a PS2. I paid $20 for both of them. They're perfectly fine. The actual PS1 that I have is like super mint. It's not even like changing colors or nothing. It's like super gray. I was like, yo, this is a good PS. I got it at I think a thrift store or something, but somebody was hiding it behind some TVs. I was like, what is this back here? Oh, snap, boop. Got it. Because they thought they were slick. They're going to hide it behind and grab it after work. But I was like, nah, son. I check all the corners, B. I got that PlayStation for $20 because it wasn't even in this system. They're like, what is this? Video game. And he was like, I don't know, $20. I was like, all right, cool. So that's how I got my PlayStation 1. And it works. I played, I came with a game, actually. I think Gex is in it or something. I forgot what game is in it. I think it might be Gex. If I'm not mistaken. And it works. I can't remember now. I know my PlayStation 2 had Guitar Hero in it. I was like, I don't have the guitar for it, so I was like, whatever. But I'm glad I had that because, you know, maybe I can get some old PS2 games or something just to mess around with it. You know, I'm kind of a collector, but not really. But anyway, you know, that's kind of it. I said that 3 times already. And, you know, that's how it is. And leave any comments below. Let me know. I mean, I left stuff out. You know, I didn't go through the Xbox generation. I didn't go through the 360 generation. I had the Red Ring of Death like twice. That was a goofy generation. The Xbox One. I've been with Xbox ever since the original Xbox, and ever since the Dreamcast, and ever since, you know, I never went Sony as a one of my consoles to play. You know, so, you know, and I don't think I'm missing too much. I mean, I see the games, I'm like, all right, that's cool, but you know, I have a nostalgia, and I have a tie, a history with Sega, as far as how it shaped me as a person. And when I look at the business practices of like Nintendo and Sony versus Sega versus Microsoft, you know, you look at who's the worst. I mean, Microsoft was bad at one point. They weren't always good. Sega, I mean, they're cool. They had really good marketing in the Genesis era. They had a bunch of attitude, and that was cool. But I don't remember them ever being as kind of malicious, if that's the right word, towards their competitors, you know? It was a competition, but I think they all played primarily, I mean, pretty fairly. And the advantage that Sega had over Sony, over Nintendo even Nintendo, was their arcade power, or their arcade in the 80s at least, was their arcades. They made some of the best arcades, all the sit-down games. It's crazy. And at one point, you know, they did Jurassic Park, and, you know, do the licensed games, and it was cool or whatever, but, you know, they divvied into the they dabbled into those 3D hologram games, which weren't that best. But anyway, let me know in the comments below, like what game, or what, if it was an arcade game, true, or if it was a console game, what game made you fall in love? That's what's up. You know, Zelda, something on the NES. Was it an arcade game? What was it? Dragon's Lair was pretty dope back in the day. But anyway, I appreciate y'all. If you like the way I do my tangs, dangerously driving and recording videos, like and subscribe, hit the like button, hit the thumbs up. I'm almost at 400 subscribers, so that's cool. I'll be soon at 5, and then I could get a couple of nickels for stuff, I guess. I don't know how monetization works, because I'm a little old man with a little old man channel. So we'll see. But I appreciate y'all, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Till the way down.